Great. Well, I want to thank everyone for coming to the summit this week, and thank you for everyone coming to this session. For those who don't know me, my name is Guthrie. I work in a couple different areas of the company. Most recently, kind of been focused for the last sort of 6 months or so on our Windows Azure cloud platform piece, and driving a lot of work there. That will be showing up kind of starting in a few weeks, and you'll see a lot more of it over the next sort of 6 to 12 months in terms of a steady wave of some pretty cool things, I think, coming out. I also am very involved on server side as well, and so I run some of the teams that build ASP.NET, WCF, Workflow, Service Bus, BizTalk, App Fabric, and a few other things there, and parts of Visual Studio as well. So kind of a little bit on the cloud front, so a lot of it on the on-premise front, the .NET front, and then also a little bit on the Visual Studio front as well. In terms of kind of the format of this talk, how many people have ever done an Unplugged talk with me before? Okay, a few people have, and they came back, so that's good. For those of you who've never done an Unplugged talk with me, it's a pretty free-form talk, so I think we have 45 minutes. It's after lunch, so everyone's kind of digesting steak and kind of tired. So try to liven it up a little bit, make it not just me talking, hopefully, but make it kind of an interactive session where we'll take it wherever you want to go. So do try to take it in an interesting place, because then it will be interesting. If you don't ask any interesting questions, it'll probably be a very boring 45 minutes. But basically, open it up to questions. What I usually do is, this is the last slide I usually show. Clean slate here, and so basically looking to have people ask questions from the audience. What I'm going to do is try to get like 10 or so questions written down, and then I will construct a talk dynamically on the fly in a very agile fashion in front of you. And so if there are 10 really interesting questions, it'll hopefully be an interesting talk. If you ask me questions about BIOS and firmware and things like that, it'll be a really bad talk. But nonetheless, we will answer your questions. So any question is fair game.
Dino's got one in the back.
I have a question, Scott.
Sure.
Way up here. What's the future of Silverlight?
Good. Let's start with an easy question. Yeah, there we go.
You get a moment. Of course, now if we get more than 10 questions, you might rank that near the bottom. We'll see.
No, keep firing away.
Okay.
Any questions, fair game.
We were all going to ask that one.
Yeah.
Having learned about TFS out in the cloud, I mentioned that to some of the people that I worked with before I came here, and they raised concerns about having our source code out there and security and that kind of thing, if we could address where that might be handled.
Sure.
I just had a question about the role of professional user experience designers in your product. We heard from one of them the other day, and we're seeing some pretty nice stuff, and I'd just like to know where that's been and where that's heading.
Yeah.
Hey, Scott, are you going to be able to talk a little bit about where you're going to take Azure? Right here?
Okay.
As far as getting it on-prem, we want to be able to run it off a DVD and then be able to put it in our data centers, leverage the power it brings.
Cool.
Okay, right here.
Yeah, one question about development tools in the cloud, like not just TFS, but like developers' machine in the cloud.
Yeah.
Scoot in front of the camera.
Let's get 2 or 3 more, and then we'll get going.
Yeah, I'd like to know what your thoughts are on doing on-site backups of data that's in the cloud.
SQL Server evolution in the cloud, specifically data limitations. I think it was 50 gigs a year ago. How is the limitations going forward?
Okay, right over here.
Do one more, and then just because it's a 45-minute session, it would suck if we get to the end and I say thank you very much and leave.
Well, you're going to have to push that Silverlight one off the bottom.
So
We'll do that one first.
expanding on the SQL Server evolution in the cloud, what about business intelligence in the cloud?
Yeah. Cool.
And that's good for now?
Yeah, let's do it. So basically we're making it interactive. Please raise your hands, throw things. kick the person next to you. Or not, throughout the session. And so please feel free to ask questions and follow-up questions. Just because it's 45 minutes and I don't want to spend 15 minutes writing questions and then run out of time to answer them all, I'm going to start putting together these in some order and attack them, but raise questions along the way. And if we run out of questions, which I think is unlikely, we can ask for more questions and add more into the queue here. Okay.
So if they have a comment or something like that, you want them to raise their hand and I'll run a mic to them? Does that sound reasonable?
Sure, that sounds great, yeah. Or if you just want to shout out loud, I can also, if I hear it, I'll repeat it.
Okay.
But if you want to run, that would be great.
And then we capture their original voice and thread it into the video and all. Very exciting.
Cool. Let's do this.
Okay.
Yep. Cool. Okay, let's do it in that order maybe. Quick show of hands. How many people know anything about Azure? Okay. How many people have no idea what Azure is? Cool. One person. Two. I don't know, more and more people. Okay. How many people here have never done a cloud solution at all? Okay. So I'll tell you what. Let me kick it off, even though it's unplugged. I'm actually going to power up PowerPoint for just a second and do like 3 minutes just to give kind of a little bit of context so that the rest of my talk will make some sense to some of the people in the audience. Oh,
now, can you maximize your notepad window? Or?
It is actually maximized. Let me minimize it.
Right.
And then you can see it, it looks like. There's a little bit of clipping going on there. But actually, let me first do the Silverlight question, and then we'll talk about Azure. So it's a question I get asked a lot, unfortunately, in the last week or two. Unfortunately, the Silverlight team does not work for me anymore. So what I'm going to say is not from the team perspective, but I can provide a little bit because a lot of people have asked questions. The Silverlight 5 is about to ship. I can say that. And should be in the next 2 or 3 weeks. And so it'll be available. A few people have asked me, what browsers does it support? It supports all the same browsers it supports today and all the same platforms it supports today. And so I think the Silverlight 5 release is a great release. And so I'm pretty excited to see it come out there. In terms of kind of in terms of future of XAML, future of Silverlight, another question people often ask. In terms of kind of XAML itself and in terms of Silverlight itself, one of the things that we've kind of been doing over the last 2 or 3 years is kind of taking XAML and using it in lots of different places. And so you've seen it with Windows Phone. You saw it with Windows 8 at the Build conference in terms of how you can reuse XAML and reuse those same assets across multiple form factors. I think you will see us continue to focus on apps that are integrated into experiences like we have done with Phone and like we have done with Windows 8. And I don't know where my screen went. And so I think you're going to continue to see that as kind of a core evolution. But in terms of the next release of Silverlight, it's basically Silverlight 5 will come out hopefully in the next 2 or 3 weeks. And I think it's going to be a great release. I'm pretty excited to see what the team has put together as part of that. So I don't know if that answered some of it. But feel free to send an email if you have other questions. In terms of kind of on the Azure front then, switching gears slightly, since a lot of people don't know Azure that much, let me do a quick, super high-level, 1,000-foot set of slides that just provide a tiny bit of context, and then we'll drill into the specific questions. In terms of kind of why the cloud is interesting, just to kind of quickly summarize 2 things I think are interesting, and I'll kind of talk about when we get to some of the questions. One is, it lets you save money. There's a lot of economic savings by moving to the cloud, and ultimately, hopefully, it lets you do more with less. Paying less money, and it really enables new scenarios in terms of new capabilities, in terms of new things that you can do. And I'll talk about some of those when we talk about some of the scenarios in terms of it. Azure is a cloud platform provided by Microsoft. It's been in market about 20 months. It basically provides a bunch of capabilities. So it's what we call usage-based. So it's a service we run in our data centers in the cloud. You can walk up to it as a developer and basically say, hey, I want to actually run an app there. I want to run it across X number of machines. I want to use Y amount of storage, and I want to have Z amount of bandwidth. and we'll basically provision that for you, run your application there, and you only actually pay for whatever you use. And you basically have the flexibility where at any point you can dial up or dial down resources, and again, you only have to pay for what you use. It provides a bunch of capabilities and features for you to do it. Everything's automated with Azure, so basically you can use an admin tool if you want to, but we also have REST-based interfaces for everything and every service we provide. And so anything you want to do there, you can script out using any language you want and make everything kind of fully automated. There's no manual intervention. Again, everything's automated. We provide what's called managed resources, which means that we do we kind of monitor the VM. We actually manage the network for you. And the benefit there is you're not having to spend a lot of dollars and time doing kind of traditional IT tasks along those lines. As a result, you get better availability. You don't have to deal with patching. You don't have to deal with hardware failures. We kind of abstract the system so that we provide those capabilities for you. It's elastic, so if you need tens of thousands of servers, if you need petabytes of storage, you can get that. Again, it saves you money and opens up lots of possibilities. In terms of data centers, right now we have 6 data centers around the world that are active with Azure. These are all of our data centers, but we have 2 in North America, 2 in Europe, 2 in Asia. We always have 2, so if you ever want to have kind of a failover capability, you always have 2 in a particular zone. All of our data centers run at very peak energy consumption. Our latest data centers are kind of what's called 1.1 power unit effectiveness. It's kind of one of the best in the industry. And we use renewable resources wherever possible for power. And for people that are curious and say, hey, what does a data center look like? What does the cloud look like? This is kind of a sneak peek of what an inside of a data center looks like. We use these containers to actually store racks of thousands of machines. Basically, we assemble the computers elsewhere. These are very strong men. Basically, I don't know how they do it. But anyway, they roll the racks in. We plug in water. We plug in electricity. And then we leave the building. And so they're completely self-managed remotely. They're in usually the middle of nowhere next to a big river that we use for water. And that's kind of where your system's running. So everything's lights out. Everything's remote. Everything's automated. As you think about Agile and you think about kind of best practice development techniques, today, oops, more clipping. Today when you build applications, we always say, hey, you should automate everything. Don't do manual things. Don't use automation wherever possible to enable predictability of development. One of the things that the cloud kind of enforces, because you actually don't have physical access to the machines, you don't actually can't go and kick and repower the machine if you want to, is that kind of overall development model. And so there's actually a lot of principles around Agile that in general you can kind of see reflected a little bit in the cloud. And it kind of, as we kind of go through these list of questions, I'll kind of call out both from a kind of process perspective as well as a mindset perspective, how you can kind of think about that with the cloud. So what can you do with the cloud? Well, you can do lots of different things. And I'm not going to give a sales pitch on Azure, but in general, you can build lots of interesting applications, whether they're software as a service-based applications that you want to resell, whether they're enterprise line of business applications for internal use, whether they're mobile applications for connected devices, whether they're games, whether they're just large amounts of storage, whether it's data mining. There's lots of interesting kind of usage cases, I think, in general for the cloud. We hope to make Azure kind of a useful thing that is useful for all of those and is something that you are interested in and want to actually take advantage of. In terms of kind of where we're taking Azure, I think from a developer perspective for this audience, kind of the vision of where we want to go with Azure is how do we kind of provide you with a much richer toolbox that enables you to build even better solutions, which sounds kind of trite. But from a capability perspective, how can we kind of basically provide you with a really sharp sword that you can use to build anything, and basically kind of gives you both from an automation perspective, from a capability perspective, from a price perspective, and from a scale perspective, enables you to kind of build solutions faster. Give me a couple examples of that. How many times have you ever said, hey, I want to actually spin up a new application. I need a couple of virtual machines in my enterprise in order to run it on? A number of times. And how many times has your IT said, oh, I'll do it in 5 minutes, don't worry? Less times, usually. Sometimes, what's the average time does it take you to get a new hardware machine or a new virtual machine? A week? About a week. That's typically what most people say, is about a week. Sometimes it's a month, sometimes it's a day, sometimes it's a couple hours, but rarely is it, I just want it in a couple minutes. And you know, in terms of kind of provisioning it, having to deal with patching, having to kind of automate when the app's down, you know, that's a pain. You have to deal with that stuff today, and it's not the fun stuff of doing development. It's usually kind of the pain of it. In terms of, you know, hey, I want to actually store lots of data, or I need lots of bandwidth. Can you please make sure the network is clear, or I have isolation? You know, again, that's probably something where it's a couple meetings, it's a couple days, it's a couple weeks of discussion. How do I do backup? How do I do disaster recovery? How do I, you know, if this app needs to stay up all the time, how do I actually enable it to be up? And those are types of things that are just painful. In a world of how many people are building mobile apps for enterprises or for other applications today? You know, I think in general, you know, all of us have a phone that is internet connected, and you know, at some point we're all going to have tablets or slates or TVs that are connected as well. And even in the enterprise scenario of, hey, I got a mobile worker, or I want to quickly check, well, how's my business doing? You're going to want to be able to access it on a phone. There's huge security issues. We'll get to security a little bit later in terms of how do I actually expose that so that a mobile device can basically hit my server and I can actually get access to that data in a secure way and display it. All those things in general get easier with cloud-based solutions. And kind of what we're trying to do with Azure is basically make it trivial for you to build those types of solutions, provide kind of an architectural pattern for how you scale them, and I like to call it, you know, fall into the pit of success, if you will, in terms of as you build it, building it in a fault-tolerant way so that you get the reliability, you get the security, and you can scale it out appropriately. So let me just do like the 30-second demo of how to build an app and run it in the cloud to give a little bit of, can people see my screen? There we go. You know, what does an Azure experience look like? So we're going to file a new project, ASP.NET, and so we'll call this the ALM Summit. So I'm just going to create a vanilla ASP.NET project, and new version of MVC. A lot of people mentioned mobile. We got a lot of mobile capabilities that we're adding to MVC, so we have new mobile templates. If I was using MVC4, I could just select that from the template, and then I have something that can access, it can be kind of available to any type of mobile device. In this case here, we're just going to say, welcome to ASP.NET MVC, or hey, welcome to the ALM Summit on Azure. And hey, this is just vanilla app. This is nothing Azure enabled yet. What I want to do, though, is I want to deploy it into the cloud. I want to run this on multiple instances. I want fault tolerance in case a power supply or network or the hardware fails. And I want to basically make this available to anyone in the world. So how do we do that? I'm going to right-click. We have a new feature here that we've just added called Add Windows Azure Deployment Project that you can do to any .NET Server project. I'm going to basically add that into my solution. This adds a couple of extra config files where you can set different settings. We have the ability to do both cloud, local, testing, staging, different configurations, so you can have it in different life cycles. This little node here is wired up what's called a web node, or web role. And so in Azure, we have this concept of when you build your app, rather than have to deal with the virtual machines, rather than have to deal with patching, you instead say, here's my app, please run it for me. And we'll basically manage the OS and the hosting environment for that application. And so we have a worker role, which allows you to run any arbitrary code you want. And we have what's called a web role, where basically we run IIS and we manage all the site configuration for you. And so let's double click on this. We can set some details around the machine we want to run. So you want to run two instances, 3, 4? How many servers do you want to spin up? 4. Okay. It's expensive demo. We spare no expense. We're going to run 4 servers. You can choose what size servers you want to run. We have what's called small servers. It's a single core processor, 1.7 gigahertz. We have mediums, dual core, large, 4 core. Very large is 8 core. This is my personal credit card. We're going to run small because you picked 4. I can configure other things. I can do certs and things like that. So this is kind of dev time settings. There is a local emulator, so I can actually run it locally. But let's go big and let's just deploy it without ever running it. It's a very agile thing to do. Not. It was a joke. But basically, right-click and hit Publish. This is a new wizard we just shipped. So a new tooling update for the Azure SDK we just shipped on Monday. If you've ever used Azure in the past, you'll know that we kind of used to make you deeply understand certificates and lots of places where you put certs. We've tried to not do that anymore. Basically, you could run this. You go to the Azure website, and I'm going to say, yeah, I don't know how that account got created. But anyway, someone gave it to me. Anyway, once you log in, you read this text. It says, hey, do you want to save a publishing profile? I'm going to save it. I'm going to call this the ALM retreat or summit, maybe. And so basically, it's just a file. It stores some publishing settings. Go to the desktop. There it is. This is a one-time only thing, so you only have to do this once on your box. This basically then includes all the subscriptions that you have in Azure, so you can have a notion of different subscriptions. So I could have, for a company, 8 subscriptions, 1 per department, or I could have it per application or per project. It's basically just a billing unit that I can deploy to. I only have 1, so I'm just going to pick it. What do we want to call this? ALM Summit demo?
I like the name.
What's called ALM Summit. How about that? Demo. Well, why not? You can pick what data center around the world you want to run this in. So we're going to pick South Central US, which is San Antonio. Hit OK. This is going off and using a REST API in Azure and basically just provision for us a new DNS entry and a new IP address that we can route all traffic to for the cloud. I can then basically say, do I want to run production or staging? We have the ability so that you can do what are called multiple different ways to do updates so that your app is never down. We're just going to do production. I can explain that a little bit later. You can do build or release, obviously. You can choose different config settings, whether you're local, cloud, or testing. We're going to enable RDP access, so you can do remote access in case something goes wrong. And you can do remote live debugging. By doing this, we're creating the appropriate cert for security, automatically generating it, and VS will upload it for us. Click Next, click Publish, and we're on the cloud. And so this is basically now going off to Azure. We've created that site. We've configured a virtual IP address. We're going to set up network hardware routing rules. So we'll have a hardware load balancer for the site. We're going to spin up 4, not 2, but 4 servers for the site that will evenly distribute the load across. And basically, we're going to, within each of those servers, have a virtual machine with an OS that's managed by us. So we're doing all the OS patching for you. We're going to run IIS. We're going to configure the right DNS. If we'd specified SSL certs, we'd wire it up. And then basically, we're going to bring the server farm into rotation. If any of those machines ever go down, it'll automatically be pulled from rotation, and we'll send the traffic to the other 3, and then we'll dynamically spin up a new server somewhere else and send the traffic to it. Yeah.
So I've got 2 questions.
Sure.
The first would be, can I do all of that on a build server? And the second would be, can I disable the interface so my developers cannot deploy from their local machine to the cloud?
Yes, so good question. So 2 questions there. One is, please tell me that you don't just do it for the GUI. And don't worry, we don't just do it from the GUI. You can do, everything's automated. There's build tasks for everything. And so absolutely, you can set up a build server, whether it's with TFS or any other build server you want or any other type of continuous integration process you want. Absolutely, you can script everything. You can also just, if you wanted to pick your favorite scripting language, they're just REST APIs. And so you can package up and deploy any app you want. What was the second question again? It was the
can I disable this so that you cannot publish from a local machine to the cloud?
Yeah, and so the question is, can you disable this so you can't publish from a local machine to the cloud? Absolutely. What you typically would do in that configuration there is your devs would, there's a local emulator. And so you can basically run the app locally, obviously without having to have the cloud. And we have like a storage emulator and things like that. And so your devs typically in that configuration would just do that. And then you could set it up so that as part of a continuous integration gated check-in, you could build, run your unit tests, check for code coverage, and then deploy. And basically you can see here, we have 4 instances that are spinning up here now. They're being provisioned with an OS. Our app will be deployed on it. What's nice here is you are isolated per machine. So each customer, each app that you deploy is in a separate virtual machine. You don't have to worry about someone else running in your process. We also kind of use, again, kind of an agile kind of practice here is automate everything. There's no one in that data center except those very 4 strong men. But they don't have access inside the containers anyway. And so everything's automated. In fact, once we seal a container, we never actually go in it. We can't go in it. It is sealed. Basically, if enough machines die, we take the container out and ship it on a truck back to the manufacturer to fix. But we actually don't, when a machine goes bad, go in and fix it. It's sealed. It's there for 3 or 4 years until enough machines have died that we pull it out and we replace it. So everything has to be automated. And everything has to be repeatable because things fail. Hardware fails, humans make mistakes. And so every time you do a deployment, we actually will restart the VM and we will lay down the images from scratch. We use differencing disks, so we're not having to do everything automated or everything manually. But we don't do anything manually, but we don't have to do everything from scratch. But the benefit there is if you want to run a startup task that configures something in your app, you do it once, and you know that even if you're going to do that thing 50,000 extra times, it will always be exactly the same because there's never state left on the machine. You never have to worry about the previous build screwing something up. It's always clean, and you can always do it. We also, when we deploy stuff, we deploy it in a certain configuration here that I'll just show you in a slide because it's probably easier to explain in a slide than here. But basically, one of the things we kind of realize is stuff fails. Hardware fails, software fails, everything fails. Humans are error prone. And so one of the things we do is, and hardware fails too. And so if you think about a typical kind of environment at work, you have to deal with the call at 2 in the morning that a machine went down, or 4 in the afternoon a machine went down, and you have to scramble to bring up a machine. That downtime, it might only be minutes, it might be hours for your company. That costs a lot of money. And so one of the things that we do is when we deploy across our data center, so that application, those 4 servers we're deploying right now, our data center is aligned where we have aggregate load balancers that are multiplexed. So if a load balancer fails, we can switch over. And then basically we have what are called racks throughout our data center. And each rack in turn has nodes, or better thought of as servers. And each rack is isolated to have a separate power unit and a separate top of rack switch. And the benefit there is it means that if one of them fails, only the machines inside that rack go down. Everything else around the network is isolated. Now you might ask, but it sucks to be on that machine if it goes down. Well, the other thing that we do is if you set up your app, so you say, let's say we picked 4 servers, or as long as you do more than 2 servers, we'll actually deploy your app so that it goes across multiple racks. And the benefit there is if a rack fails, or a server fails, or a network switch fails, or a power unit fails, only that particular rack and those machines on there will be affected. All of your other 3 instances in this case, or 2 instances in this case, will be unaffected. The load balancer will automatically pull that app out of rotation, distribute the load to all the other systems, and then we'll spin up a new instance on a separate rack, bring your app back in, and then bring it back in rotation. And the benefit there is you don't have to think about that. You can check the logs and see, oh, look, the machine rebooted for some reason, or it was knocked out last night. You don't actually know. And so the benefit here is we can actually give you a 99.95% monthly SLA where we guarantee uptime. And if we don't meet it, you get to ask for money back, and we have to pay you back. We hate doing that. So, so you basically get a kind of quality of service and kind of a guarantee. And the beauty is, from a developer perspective, I didn't actually have to think about all that at all. The architecture and the hardware takes care of it for you. And likewise, when you want to do an update on an app, so this is a brand new deployment, so this will take a few minutes. But if you're doing an update on the app, the other thing that we'll do is we have a couple different ways of doing updates. One of which is if I bundle up my package, if I bundle up my app and deploy it, an update, we'll actually, if you have 4 instances, we'll bring down some of the instances to update it, pull them out of rotation, update the code, and then bring down the other machines. But that way your app is never down, and so you can basically do rolling updates with 0 interruption of service. So that was a long-winded first answer, and I have 15 minutes to do the other 4 questions, or 8 questions. But that's a little bit of basics in terms of kind of how the system works and sort of how we think about what you can do with it.
I see a comment in the back.
Yeah.
I'll run it up there. Oh.
I was wondering how you treat third-party tools that you need to install on a server that might use like a machine-specific license.
Yeah, so the question is, how would you treat like third-party tools that you need to install on a server? Like you want to do, I want to run a custom data store, or you want to run a custom job or something on the machine. Basically, we have a concept we call a task, where basically inside the app you can define, I want this task to run every time the role starts up for the first time, and basically you can run arbitrary code. And so if you want to install MySQL, you can. If you want to install an SMTP server, you can. You can do anything specific to the app. The other thing you can do as part of a solution is, so this is a simple ASP.NET app with a web role, is I could also have what's called a backend role or worker role. And you can basically put them as part of the solution. So if you want to do a true multi-tier deployment where I have backends and front ends, I can do that in the solution. And when I deploy it, I can manage it as an app. And so it's not that I'm actually updating separate machines. I'm think of it as I'm deploying an app that has multiple tiers, and I can version it as one and integrate it as one. And for security reasons, I can actually control, think of the app itself effectively being surrounded by a firewall. And so only the ports I open up will be open inside the app. And I can set it up so my web and my worker backend can talk to each other, but no one else can talk to the worker. And I think we finished deploying here. And so ALM Summit demo.cloudapp.net is probably somewhere on the web. Oops. And so the network comes back. There we go. And so basically that's kind of our app running on the web. If I wanted to, I could go in and click on hosted services. There are my 4 instances running. If I wanted to, I could also RDP in. So this is generally, again, you want to automate everything, but sometimes it's useful to be able to peek onto the box. And so basically what I'm doing right here, because I wired up each of those 4 servers that we just provisioned on the web for RDP support, I can actually RDP in. This is the very first time, so I'm just going to set up my desktop. And now I am RDP'd into a server running in San Antonio, Texas. And I can do local debugging. We support IntelliTrace. We support the ability to grab perfmon logs or profile dumps and other log analysis. And so basically, that was how easy it was to spin up a new instance of the app and machines. Yeah.
So I have a question.
Yeah.
So, in the past, a .NET framework patch actually broke one of our apps. So what happens in Azure? I mean, are you just going to deploy the patch to all of your servers? And how do I tell Microsoft, please remove that patch from my servers?
Good question. Yes, the question is, what about patching? So we do provide by default automatic patching support so that you don't have to install OS patches. We'll install it, and we kind of use that rolling update mechanism so that your app's never down while we install patches. What you can do, though, is you can go to the portal and say, don't install patches. I want to approve the patches. And so you can turn off the auto patching capability, and then you can vet them, and then you can choose which ones you want to install. Yeah. The other thing we do that's kind of useful is I've never actually done this in a demo, so this will be fun to try live on stage, never having done it before. But let's say I decide, you know what, you're bankrupting me. I don't want 4 servers. I want 2. And what I think I should be able to do, hypothetically, is I could basically dial that down to 2 and then republish. Now I could do one of 2 things. I could either publish it to my live app, in which case Azure will spin down 2 of those nodes, or let's say I made another change that was more dramatic. In fact, let's just do Welcome to ALM Summit 2011. I could go ahead and publish now. And I'm going to change it. You can do profile settings. You probably wouldn't do this all the time. But I'm going to deploy to what's called staging instead of production. Who knows? Hopefully this works. And what this is basically going to go and do, I hope, is it will actually deploy. It won't take my 4 servers down. It's going to keep my 4 servers up. But it's going to set up a special staging site, which will spin up my 2 new servers. And so I can actually do all the testing on that new servers, and then I can swap them into rotation and replace my existing 4 in a sub-second switch. And so in theory, this deployment's kicked off. We'll answer some more questions, and at the end, I should be able to, inside the admin tool, let's see if I hit refresh. Once these, actually it's still deploying. Once it's basically deployed, I can basically dynamically switch back and forth. And so that gives you kind of another way that you can do kind of fault tolerance, where you could install a patch, test it, and then swap it into rotation, as opposed to having to do it all in one go. So I think we're sort of, where are we taking Azure? So, and the user experience, why it matters. I mean, so at a high level, in terms of kind of, so I'm relatively new to Azure, so I'm kind of 5 or 6 months into the job. The tools that I just demoed, we shipped on Monday, so that's kind of one of the first things that I worked on that's coming here. In terms of kind of where we're taking Azure, I'd say Azure itself is super powerful. That's partly why I was interested in the job. And so there's lots of power and capabilities, I think, with the cloud in general. And hopefully you saw, you can do a lot of stuff with it quickly. I think in terms of where we're going to take Azure even further is you're going to see us really focus on user experience. You're going to see us really focus on the end-to-end experience and what you can do with it. And really try to get it to a super polished state, both in terms of the experience and then also kind of build out on top of it a whole bunch of capabilities that are kind of truly unique and differentiated. And I don't mean just from other cloud providers, but also with what you can do today on premise. And so, I showed you a little bit like, hey, I can spin up 4 servers in a few minutes versus a week. But, the other things I could do would be things like, hey, I want to do a mobile projection head on top of that. And then I want to tunnel back to a mainframe, or I want to tunnel back to a legacy system inside an existing data center. Or I want to basically do lots of data, or I might have petabytes of storage, and I want to do rich data mining and provide real-time visualization on it. Or I might want to do video encoding in the cloud, or I might want to do kind of unique things that, frankly, we just typically in an enterprise environment or an on-premise environment, whether it's the Microsoft enterprise environment, your own environment, we don't do because it's just too hard, it's too expensive, it's too much aggravation to set up. And can we make that really easy so you just say, yep, I want that feature, and I go ahead and use it, and I'm only paying for what I actually use. And that's kind of where I think you're going to see Azure from an experience perspective and from a developer perspective. Ultimately, I want this, I think this cloud thing is going to pay off, in that it's going to save your company's money, but I think also from a developer perspective, it's going to make development a lot more fun, because you're not wrestling with the IT staff begging for a VM. You're not spending time debugging why is the network failing. You're spending your time debugging other problems that are more interesting, hopefully, and ultimately on projects that are even bigger in terms of scope and in terms of impact, in terms of what you can deliver. Question was sort of user experience and why. Someone asked about user experience, how we think about user experience, why it matters. I think often people ask about user experience and they often think of it as moving pixels around the screen. I've even seen it within my own teams where they're like, yeah, we'll get a designer to make it pretty. And that usually kind of makes me cringe. Because I kind of think of user experience as being a lot more than about the pixels or the design. It's really kind of how does the product feel, how does it use? And I'd say candidly, Azure today, Azure this week with the new tooling has a better user experience than it did last week with the old tooling. And there's a few people nodding that have seen the old tooling. But it's not because we've actually gone ahead and made the dialogues pretty. They're not that pretty. But kind of really focusing on what's the task that needs to be accomplished. How do you remove friction? How do you make everything kind of easy? And I don't mean easy for like morts, but like it's just something I want to actually sit down and use as opposed to kill myself using. And we've all used products where the latter is probably more appropriate in terms of the experience. One of the things I did for the first kind of 2 weeks in the job was I kind of took the top sort of 60 people on the team, a lot of the managers that hadn't coded in a while, so that was fun, and kind of brought them to a hotel, and we kind of rented out a little ballroom and said we're going to spend a full day just building code, writing apps on our platform. And it's always fun when you have like a senior manager that manages lots of people. It's like, building the app plat, and they're like, we have to write code. You're like, yeah, and I'm going to sit next to you and watch you. And it was fun. It was fun, because it was a chance to get kind of hands-on with the product and really focus on the user experience. And we kind of split people up into 10 teams, and we had people from different feature teams all split up together. So it was like kind of a nice socialization thing. And we said, you got to sign up with the product. You need to build an app. You need to deploy an app. And then you need to do one of these 5 scenarios. And they were multi-tier scenarios. They were mobile. They were all these things. And to make it real, I went to Safeway, bought 10 credit cards with $25 on them, handed them out to each team, and said, you have to create a live ID. You got to enter in this credit card. You got to go through the whole experience. And it was terrible. I mean, about 30% of the teams were unable to successfully register on the site and deploy Hello World in 90 minutes. Those people aren't on the team anymore. But no. They are all on the team. But it was kind of, to the user experience aspect, we spent so much time with Azure focusing on the kernel, networking switch, the reliability, and a lot of stuff I showed, there's a lot of real science behind it. But we hadn't spent time on sign up. We hadn't spent time on the billing page. We hadn't really spent time on the tools. And so we made you create lots of certs and put them in wacky places. And I think part of why user experience matters is you can, a good user experience, you don't even notice it. It's not about the prettiness of it. It's just it lets you get the task done. And I think that's really important to the product. And so the tools I showed here is kind of a first step at that. If you do the A/B compare with the old tools, you'll see a big difference. You'll see a lot of improvements in a couple weeks on the website, the sign up, a lot of things that people struggled with. There were bugs in the product or they were just confusing in the product and pricing and things like that. You'll see a lot of kind of focus on that. And ultimately the goal is not to make it look pretty, although we probably have made it look a lot prettier. But it's really around how do you strip away everything that's unnecessary and let the person get the task done. And I think from a team perspective, making sure people know that that's valued and really critical is important. And sometimes there are disciplined people that need to, you need to have someone who actually does have a good aesthetic that can help with that. But I think it's super important from a dev and a PM and a test perspective of, hey, we're all about how do we make this product easy to use and have a great experience. In terms of developer services in the cloud, one of the things also that's I think going to be powerful and exciting around the cloud is the ability not just to run apps, but to actually take advantage of infrastructure. I think Brian talked at some point in the summit earlier today about hosted TFS and some of the work he's doing to kind of bring TFS to the cloud. And in the same way that, hey, I can go ahead and create 4 servers or 2 servers in the cloud, deploy my app and take advantage of them, and I'm only paying pennies on the dollar or whatever in terms of running them. Being able to go to hosted TFS and say, yep, I want hosted TFS in the cloud, create a project, do the source control management, the server management, the backups for me. Ultimately that's weeks or days of effort that you can save from having to do that on premise. I think you're going to see a whole bunch more developer services. In fact, I know you're going to see a whole bunch more developer services come out from us and from others in terms of kind of making life easier. And you think about whether they're builds or tests or perf testing or stress testing or load testing, whether you think about mobile services, whether you think about data services, there's just an endless set of opportunities in terms of what I think is going to be possible. And at the end of the day, it's going back to the user experience. I think hopefully it strips away a lot of the crap you got to do today and lets you really focus on delivering value and solutions. In terms of Azure on a DVD, it's a question of, hey, okay, so it's great if you can do all this cloud stuff, but I work in a place that's ultra secure, or I work in a continent that you don't have a data center yet. How do I take advantage of some of this goodness, and how does that world relate? In general, we're doing a couple things. One is we are trying to go to more continents, and so you will see more data centers from us and from our hosting providers show up around the world. We have a concept we call an Azure appliance, which is basically like those containers, but you can actually park them in your own garage or your company's garage data center. And basically it has the exact same experience, it's the same admin tool, it's the exact same programming model, but effectively you own that container and everything in it. And so for very large companies or governments, we typically expect people to probably go that route, and then it's 100% fidelity. We are also going to be working on providing kind of more symmetry between the cloud and the server. Because if you're a .NET dev and you're a VS dev, guess what? .NET runs in Azure, it runs on server. And we're actually spending a lot of time trying to figure out all the little differences. How can we get rid of as many of those differences as possible so that you can learn one set of concepts, and regardless of whether you're doing it cloud server or even on the client, you can kind of leverage those kind of capabilities. And so you'll see more about that in the years ahead. But that's definitely something we're focusing on, and I think expect to see kind of .NET play a bridging role. It's no accident that my team, which is the AppPlat team, owns both Azure and on-premise server. It's because we think both are important, and it makes sense to have the two together. Security is definitely something a lot of people are worried about, and they should be worried about. There's scenarios, frankly, that don't make sense in the cloud for a variety of reasons. We're trying to make sure that we have as a secure environment as possible and provide a whole bunch of security features so that you can protect and store things securely there and feel confident that it's as secure as in your own data center. At the same time, though, they'll be either for security reasons, or you've got a big app that's already running and you just can't spend the time to have to move the code. Reasons that you don't want to have that data leave your own environment. And so one of the other things that we do with Azure is a set of features that enable you to kind of build apps that are running, for example, this ALM Summit website in the cloud. So it's running code in the cloud, it's caching some data in the cloud, but also that app can tunnel back into my corporate enterprise and retrieve appropriate data or secure data as necessary as part of the solution. And so I could have a mainframe, or I could have a SQL system or Oracle system in my back end that's in my data center. And I might want to say these 4 bits of information I want to expose to my cloud-based app. And we have a pretty cool feature we call Service Bus, which allows you to set up a SOA-based endpoint within your own data center. You can then basically publish endpoints inside Azure, and you can set up a persistent connection between your data center and Azure, and then you basically can program to it from within the cloud. And a great kind of customer example of this is a company called EasyJet. People know about them. They're an airline in Europe. And they kind of they focus on kind of turning around traffic really quickly, about 20 minutes between flights. They do 120 destinations, 45 million customers per year, 1,000 flights per day. And they're all over the place. A lot of people use them for holidays, so they're also in lots of seasonal places that you only go in the summer, you only go in the winter, and so traffic flows. And from a regulatory perspective, setting up airports and managing IT infrastructure across hundreds of airports across dozens of countries is a nightmare, because they all have separate regulatory approval processes. And at the same time, though, the airplanes need some way to check people in. They need to do baggage management, and they want to be able to turn around aircrafts really quickly. And so one of the things that these guys did, which was pretty smart, was to say, let's get rid of all the kiosks. Let's get rid of, you walk up to a desk and there's a computer terminal. Let's actually go to handhelds that our employees use, and then let's either use Wi-Fi or 3G in order to connect to our back end. And the benefit there is we don't have to get approval to lay down cabling inside the airport, and so we can actually rev and iterate it fast. And what they did was basically their mobile devices talk to what we call service bus endpoints inside Azure. And so it's just using WCF. And these are basically persistent connections inside Azure that are opened up that these guys talk to. And then basically inside their data center in Luton in the UK, they basically have WCF SOA endpoints that then connect up to those same endpoints in the cloud. And effectively, Azure is just a relay from a communication perspective back on premise. And the benefit there was they were able to do it in about 3 days, build a proof of concept. They didn't have to rewrite any of their back-end code. They were able to take their WCF knowledge, set up the relay connection, and then have their mobile devices connect to it. And then what they found was, hey, you know what? We could also get our partner websites to use these same endpoints. They can lock down everything. They're not opening up a VPN tunnel inside their firewall. Only those particular service endpoints that they wish to expose are actually out there in the world. And you could use REST for that as well if you wanted to. But you know, that's some of the opportunities also from a security perspective. You know, we are spending a lot of time focusing on security, but at the same time, you know, some stuff you just want to keep on premise. Last few minutes quick, SQL and data. A lot of people are asking about that. You're going to see a lot more evolution of SQL Azure, which is our relational database service in the cloud that we run on Azure in the weeks and months ahead. In fact, you might even see an announcement tomorrow that I will get in trouble if I tell you now. But someone asked questions about more database size capacity. Stay tuned. Didn't say anything. You'll see more of that. For people that don't know, SQL Azure is kind of cool in the sense of one of the kind of principles in distributed programming is you always write to disk 3 places, because that way if a disk goes bad, you don't lose stuff. And so whenever we do storage inside Azure, by default, we store things in 3 places. And so SQL Azure will actually automatically effectively cluster your database in 3 locations. And so we do all the backup clustering for you so that if a disk goes bad, your data is not lost. We do provide full automated backups for you, so you also don't have to run your own backup service, although you can download it off-premise if you want to as well. You'll see lots of really cool things that we're doing with SQL Azure going forward. We'll also support unstructured data, we call blob storage. We're also going to be enabling NoSQL, sort of schemaless or more table-focused storage as well. And so there's lots of things there. On the BI front, you're going to see lots of things around BI in the cloud. You know, one of the things I think is kind of interesting around computing right now is the cost of storage is plummeting. Although with the Thailand flooding, it's going back up, but that's hopefully a temporary blip. But in general, you know, the cost to store a gigabyte or a petabyte of storage has gotten to the point that you can actually, anyone can do it. With Azure, we just 2 weeks ago changed our pricing on storage because we upgraded our whole storage network. We now have the cheapest storage in the cloud industry. We're lower than Amazon right now. So if you want to back up data into the cloud or you want to store lots of data in the cloud, we have a really cost-effective way to do it. I think our base price, just if you want to store a gigabyte, is like 14 cents per gigabyte. And you can access it completely programmatically. Again, it's pay as you go, so if you delete the data, you don't have to pay. And you can programmatically access it from an app. You can write your own script to do it. This is a simple little freeware tool that someone built. And so if I want to go to files here and I want to upload, oh, not my security cert. Let me upload this deck that we've been working on that has only one slide, called Unplugged. You know, basically this is uploading into Azure stop twittering. But basically, this is going to upload it into Azure, and then I can mark this to either be publicly downloadable or only available within my app inside Azure. And so a lot of companies now are backing up tremendous amounts of data, whether you have log files, customer receipts, PDF documents, whatever. The cost of storage has gotten so cheap. The biggest data I give you is never throw anything away again because you're almost guaranteed that you can find and mine value out of it. And so, you know, this deck is now up there on the web that anyone could access. Or again, I can mark it private, and that front-end ALM website that we've done can access it programmatically inside the same data center, and so it's really fast. And again, cost-effective. We're going to be providing data mining services that you can use as an app developer. So if you want to run a query job with MapReduce across 1,000 machines or 10,000 machines, you can actually spin those up, say, run this job, go across petabytes of storage, get the insight, and then shut down the machine capabilities. And so that type of thing in the cloud starts to move from science fiction to actually something you can do. And we actually have customers today that are storing multiple petabytes of storage inside Azure and spinning up each night 10,000 machines, actually crunching the data. A lot of people in the financial services world. And then the beauty about the cloud is when the machines aren't running, you ain't paying. And so if you only need 4 hours of processing each night before the market opens, spin up those 10,000 machines, process it, shut them down, and you're only paying for the 4 hours a day that you actually need those machines. And that's, again, part of what the cloud is unique about, and you're going to see lots of data stuff there. On-site backups of data in the cloud, you can also do that. So within SQL Azure or inside your blob storage, you can also definitely replicate things on-premise as well. The other cool thing, though, about our storage system that we do is because we write everything 3 locations, again, if a disk fails, you have 2 other places you can get access to it. The other thing I'll mention is this blob storage where I just uploaded this file into. Oops, where is it? I just uploaded it into the San Antonio data center because that's where the storage account is configured. So it's the same one as our web servers. What we'll do is we'll make sure before we commit the transaction, it's on 3 separate server banks of machines. So again, if one of those machines fail, I still have availability of the data. We also now, by default, you can turn it off if you want to, enable what's called geo-replication. And so that same file is, over the next few minutes, going to be automatically backed up to a location in Chicago, to a data center that's at least 500 miles away, so that in the unlikely event that the city of San Antonio stops existing, it's in Chicago. There's bigger problems about that happening, but your data at least is replicated somewhere else 500 miles away. Again, you don't have to deal with that. You get to take advantage of that as a capability. It's just included in the 14-cent price. So that's kind of some of the power of the cloud in a quick nutshell. I'm kind of excited. There's lots of things you're going to be able to do with it. I think that deployment we did worked. So let's see. It's working. So you'll notice here we deployed that first ALM website. Whoops. I've never actually really tried this live, so see how it works. So this is our first website where we said on Azure. And so this is kind of running on those 4 servers. And so those are those 4 servers running right there. And you'll notice I have a second deployment now of 2 servers. And so if I come back here, you'll notice I now have both running simultaneously. This one has the beautiful ALM Summit demo.cloudapp.net. This one has a beautiful GUID. But it basically means I can test it, I can warm up the app, I can make sure it's working. And from an app perspective, I basically have 2 versions of these things running. And what I, in theory, should be able to do is, and so you can see right here, this is the production and this is the staging version, is I can do what's called a swap VIP. and I can say, do you really want to do it? And you say yes. And what this is going to do, I hope if I push the right button, is actually, did I push the right button? We'll see. If I push the right button, in theory, it'll actually dynamically switch the two machines so that the production is now live on with the second version, and my old machine is now running with the GUID. And so basically I could deploy an app, I could test it using a private URL, go into the portal, hit VIP swap, and basically my second version of my app is now live. My old version is still there, and so if I realize, oh my God, I misspelled something, I could go back into the portal, push the panic button, and say, oh, swap it back. And this will basically do a dynamic swap back of the network configuration. All existing traffic will continue on the old ones. We give it a minute or so to drain the existing connections. But the beauty here is if you want to roll out an update that might have dramatic changes in the back end, the middle tier, the web tier, deploy it, test it, swap it, you can always roll back and away you go. Again, everything's automated. You're going to see a beautiful, agile environment in order to build these types of solutions. And I think hopefully as a developer, it means you're not writing scripts trying to figure out why something didn't get GAC installed. You actually can automate everything. You can take advantage of resources out there. And it's really going to let you actually focus on value and deliver a much better solution. With
Thank
that,
you,
I think
Scott.
I'm
That was amazing.
So, cool. Thank you very much.